Hey guys, hello. How's it going? Well, I'm Morpheus, and I got Adam to give me a call, Neo, and said, hey, I'm coming into Phoenix. Let's put a place together, and called Tesla, man, and he said, it's okay with the wife, let's go. And so here we are, and want to give a big round of applause to our hero, Adam, at least my hero. Woo! Boom.
More than enough of an introduction, Morpheus. Thank you very much. And thank you all for being here. This is the last stop on the Adam vs. the Man Relocation Tour. Now that I'm banned in D.C. for the next 2 years, it's okay, I already threw the ring in the fire. There's no point in me tolerating the Northern Virginia weather, so I'm moving to the next most target-rich environment for statists, Los Angeles, California. And I'm happy to be that much closer to Phoenix and the great crew around here, and Ernie and so many other great activists who have done so much for me, for Adam vs. the Man, for getting me to where I am today. And every stop on this tour has been better than the last. It's really just been amazing to see that, you know, you can just drive through the country, and everywhere you go, there's a beautiful community that springs up. And even here, I feel very safe. I know we have some open carriers in the crowd, which is great. In Dallas and in Austin, I actually had armed escorts coming into the city, which is really cool, considering I'm technically not allowed to carry myself for a little while here. But for those of you that don't know, I just completed a government-induced, taxpayer-funded spiritual retreat, courtesy of the United States Park Police, the the dregs of federal law enforcement, FBI Academy dropouts, one and all. And yeah, I'm not done poking them with a stick. But for those of you that don't know, my home was raided on July 9th after making a video loading a shotgun at Freedom Plaza, the ironically named Freedom Plaza in Washington, D.C., between the two great centers of slavery, the Capitol and the White House. And I feel really silly and naive almost as someone who makes a living talking about the danger that government represents, to be like, oh yeah, Adam, you're going to get to do this like in your face civil disobedience in the belly of the beast, and then they're going to knock on your door and say, come with us please, Mr. Kokesh, for your free and fair constitutional trial as we weigh these issues and see if DC's gun laws are actually in line with the Constitution or not. Yeah, right. And instead, I was met with a, it was technically not a no-knock raid, because they knocked about half a second before they broke the door down with a battering ram. And for those of you that haven't met him yet, this is Baloo. Baloo, come here. Come say hi. Come introduce yourself to everybody one more time. Yeah, good boy. Baloo, sit. Baloo, sit. Give me 5. No. Oh, sit. Give me 5. Good boy. Yeah. Now, as many of you know, normally when SWAT raids happen with dogs present, the dog gets shot. The only reason that Baloo survived is because as I was coming to the top of the stairs in my home, in my shorts, while the door was bursting open, they led with a flashbang grenade. And it's not really typical that they do that, but that little extra force meant that the flashbang grenade going off right under his butt, and I was at the top of the stairs looking down at him while this was happening, meant that he was freaked out of his mind and ended up running upstairs to his bed. And so while I'm going like this, and I got 3 green laser sights pointed at my chest, I'm like, yeah, Baloo, bed. And he was like, dude, I'm there. I know. Don't worry about it. And they came in with the dog, too. So he was getting, aggressive to all that. And if it wasn't for that, he wouldn't be here today. He's a SWAT raid survivor right there. That dog, yeah. Give it up for Baloo. You can find him on Facebook, too, by the way. And I think that there was a little extra motivation for this particular raid other than the video and the excuse that gave them for a search warrant. But for those of you who are familiar with my YouTube channel, you know that I do a lot of street theater, and my favorite extras are park police officers, great supporting cast. They know their lines perfectly every single time. They play right into it. I mean, it's like I couldn't script it better half the time. And they aside from the normal motivation I give them by making them look like idiots on a regular basis, there was an incident in Philadelphia, and people started getting like these 2 big arrests of mine over the last year confused. I've actually been arrested several dozen times, so I get them confused myself. But in Philly earlier that year, I was arrested for giving a speech at a marijuana legalization rally, and I still had the microphone in my hand when a park police officer tried to tackle me from behind. And I was, I guess, guilty of not letting myself be tackled. And so they charged me with assaulting a federal officer. Obviously, right? Yeah, duh. I mean, you were in the vicinity of a federal officer, and they couldn't come up with an excuse, so you must have assaulted him. And maybe it was assaulting his ego, but it happened to be someone that was featured in a video a couple months earlier. And in that case, I played hardball, and I didn't cooperate at all. I refused to identify myself, didn't take the PPD shot. I told them it was against my religion to let government agents put needles in my body. Didn't work. Refused to take a DNA swab, and ended up in the special housing unit in isolation with N.A. Poe. And he's not as funny when he's scared out of his mind. But N.A. Poe is a great Liberty comic who's been putting together these smoke-down prohibition events. And we had a probable cause hearing, and I had a good public defender in this case. And he tore the complainant's, that was another park police officer's, testimony apart. And they tried to let me out on bail with the condition that I could have known a gun. And I said, screw that, you got 90 days, bring it. And the very next day, they dropped the charges. And it was the same park police officer that came up to me as I was getting out of jail. Here are your personal possessions. Sign here for this, this, and this. By the way, here are your 2 tickets for for unlawful assembly and not following a lawful order, which there was none. I was not told to be tackled. It just sort of happened. And then they were for $250 each, and I said, yeah, right. You're going to send me back to jail if I refuse to sign these? And I didn't sign them, and I didn't look back, and I haven't paid them yet. Sometimes playing hardball really works. In this case, I don't think that was going to be it, because this might have been retaliation for something else, because at the next Smokedown event in Philly, there was a line of park police riot cops for pot smokers. I mean, obviously, if you're going to smoke pot in a park, right in front of Independence Hall, you got to have a SWAT team there for that, right? For crowd control, for all those rioting stoners. And so they had them out in like the full battle gear with the helmets and the visors and batons. And they were standing in a line like, shoulder to shoulder, like they were waiting to beat back the hordes. And the stampeding hordes of stoners. But they were just like 6 of them in a line, and you could walk all the way around them in a big circle. Like they weren't preventing anybody from walking anywhere. So I had a little fun with this, and I'd like to think, I've matured a lot in the last year in ways that I didn't think were possible. I've learned a lot of lessons the hard way. I don't think I would do this today, but since they were there and such a juicy target, I had to go and introduce myself to them one by one. Nice baton, sorry about your penis. Nice baton, sorry about your penis. What, you don't want to shake my hand either? What's wrong with you? And, so on down the line. So when they raided my home, my girlfriend at the time, who was visiting, was in the shower on her period. And they dragged her out of the shower and had her sitting in her own blood for several hours while they ransacked my home. My life savings, most of which were in the form of firearms, were stolen. The whole house was turned inside out. I was roughed up a little bit. All of my housemates were zip-tied and just forced to sit on the floor for 5 hours while all this took place. And then I got taken away to Fairfax County Detention Center. Now, when I was in Iraq, I was in Fallujah in 2004 for 7 months with the Civil Affairs team. And I took my mission really seriously. I thought that Civil Affairs was a very noble mission. We were going out to help people. And I took that part seriously. But even given that, there's a certain dehumanization of the enemy that takes place in these scenarios where they condition you to feel that anybody, from a different country or a different race or, towelhead or raghead or Haji or whatever it is somehow less than you. And I actually tortured people when I was in Iraq. And, it wasn't like Abu Ghraib, but I did sleep deprivation for guys that were zip-cuffed and sandbagged and were forced to sit in their own excrement for several days. And I really have taken a certain amount of time and in a way doing penance in my activism for a lot of the war crime that I was a part of. But I feel like now I've got a little appropriate retribution, as insignificant as it was, because for the first 3 days I was in jail, I was in, and it's maybe crossing a line, but if so, just barely. So I don't want it to sound like too much of an exaggeration, but it was kind of a torture chamber I was in for the first 3 days in Fairfax, where I had the lights on 24 hours a day. It was too cold to sleep. I had just shorts and a t-shirt, no mattress, no blanket, and I was getting 3 bologna sandwiches per day that I'm sure the jail paid about $30 each for, but it wasn't $30 worth of calories, that's for sure. And I lost 15 pounds the first 3 weeks I was in jail. And I know this because that was when I got transferred and I got a physical at DC. But I tried to play hardball and I refused. And if you saw the mug shot where I'm smiling, I'm actually handcuffed to a wheelchair in that picture. So it was certainly an interesting experience, especially considering most of the guards knew who I was and were really supportive. And I didn't find a single one that was pro-gun control. And it was like, wait a second, you guys agree with my activism? You agree with what I'm doing? You agree with the reason that I'm here, and yet now you are the reason that I'm stuck here. And those were like the best exchanges. And it's fun. It's been really fun on this tour to ask this question for these particular audiences. And you guys should really bring it in a little closer. I know we see there are people like way on the edges here. The fire's nice and warm. So are the bodies. How many people here have been arrested? Woo! Yeah. Good show of hands. Not necessarily. And it's cool that people have had that experience, but how many of you have had like really positive interactions when you've been arrested and been able to keep your cool and say, well, I'm going to reach out to this person, I'm going to talk to this person and have an exchange with them? Okay, Ernie has, I know. And I told every single officer I had an exchange with at the end, it was like, hey, excuse me, sir, do you have just a minute? I need to tell you something. You're a free, beautiful, independent human being, and you should never let anyone tell you otherwise. And some of them were just like, macho assholes who expected me to be the same. We're like, yeah, right. And then you'd have some of the nicer, open-minded ladies. Oh, well, thank you very much. But when I got to D.C., it was I had some really fun experiences because in solitary in Fairfax, it was I couldn't really talk to anybody except through the walls. In D.C., at least we had hallways and you could talk to people across. By the way, solitary is not nearly as bad as, say, solitary in The Shawshank Redemption. Have you ever seen that? It was like a black hole, and it's just blacked out 24 hours a day, and you're freezing, huddling in the corner, and they slide in bread and water. It's not like that at all. It is cushy by comparison. And having done 7 months in Fallujah and slept in the dirt, nothing that I dealt with in D.C. or through the jail was really that much of a challenge. But it was a challenge, and it was a fun experience. But there was one guard that came up to me in the middle of the night, mid-morning, and I was like looking around. Hey, dude, I heard you on Alex Jones.
Oh my God.
I really like what you had to say. You're the only one who can talk sense into him. And I was like, really? And you're still working here, man? So when I got out, I texted Alex, and I was like, dude, got some good news and some bad news. The good news is you got some people on the inside. The bad news is you still got people on the inside. And it was a really interesting experience because I was in solitary for my own protection, right? Because it was a high-profile case. And for my own protection, 3 times a week when I was allowed to take a shower, the procedure was you step up to the door, take all your clothes off, hand them through the slot, get them shaken out, squat and cough, lift them up, and then you get your clothes back, you put them on, grab your shower gear like this, you get handcuffed, and then they yell back, no, open 23, and the door slides open. I used to think that was so badass. Like, yeah, I'm so dangerous, you got to have a mechanized door to let me out of this thing. And just go, yeah. Every single time, I wasn't like, just lolling. I would just be like, yeah, waiting for that door to go all the way open. And then I would step out, lift one leg, and they put a shackle on there, and then the other leg, and then you shuffle 20 feet down the hall into the little shower cell, and then you repeat the whole process in reverse for my own protection, of course. And the one real bright spot in the media coverage of this, and like I say, I feel kind of naive. I was really underprepared for this legally, financially, organizationally. The one real bright spot was the local television coverage. You give them a 22-second video, they'll play it every opportunity they get. Virginia gun rights activist Adam Kokesh on his way to court again this morning for a status hearing. Here's the video. That evening, Virginia gun rights activist Adam Kokesh in court denied bail again today. Here's the video. And when I got to general population there, after 2 months in solitary, I was immediately mobbed by a gang of inmates with their hands outstretched saying, dude, we saw you on TV, love your show. And I felt like I was the most, the most popular inmate on the block, except, excuse me, second most popular inmate on the block, because on the first block we went to, there's actually a guy who had a brick of weed in his cell. And I didn't test this theory necessarily, but I'm pretty sure my first night in general population I could have bought a joint for $5 worth of postage stamps. And because the drug war is so successful. So the tough part about my experience really wasn't what I experienced in jail, it was what was going on the outside. And some of you are familiar with a little bit of the drama that was going on. But while I was in jail, the people that were working for me, I think they were trying to keep me in jail so they could live off my business. My legal defense fund was stolen. Most of my personal funds were stolen. When I got out of jail in November, I found out that I'd been lied to more than I had even known, and my landlord was suing me for $24,000 in damages that were done to the house. And the one thing they didn't use the stolen funds for was to pay the rent. And about a third of my possessions were in a jumble in a storage unit, and that's what I got out to. So since then, I've been putting my life back together one piece at a time. I wrote a book that I'm really excited about called Freedom, all caps with an exclamation mark. It's going to be the new scripture for the global freedom movement. Modest goal, I know, but it's really cool to be able to do a survey of the literature of our movement, even going back to Plato and Socrates, to Locke, to Adam Smith, to Spooner, to Mises, Hayek, Rand, to Rothbard being the first that really codified it as a philosophy, to Konkin, who gave us I don't want to say gave us, but really codified the concept of agorism, and Molyneux today, who's brought a whole other level of psychological wisdom to the movement. And I came up with this idea for the book, and I was like, whoa, wait a second. Nobody's written this yet? Really? The guy that took 10 years to figure out what being a libertarian meant, the guy that was a libertarian who was still dumb enough to volunteer to go to Iraq, I get to write this book? And one of the things that's cool about it is it's short, it's very accessible to everybody. It's about 140 pages. It's going to be down to 120, and unlike anything before it, it's not academic, it's not dense, and it's global in its perspective. It's not Amerocentric. So it really is as true in anywhere in the world as it is today, and it speaks not to the American experience but the global phenomenon of statism. So I've been reading chapters, and if people want to stick around later, maybe when people are drunk enough to sit still and hear me read, we can, or maybe after people have indulged in other recreational substances, we can have a little book reading later tonight. But I want to invite everybody who's been nice enough to come out to these events to be on the secret early review list for the books. If you want to email me, I'd really appreciate it. And we've been putting this out online for people internationally especially, and to get reviewers from around the world to make sure that it really squares with and represents their experience. And we've got about 60 now, and we have volunteers to translate it into enough languages to cover 90% of the population. We've even got someone who's going to translate it into Esperanto. and Klingon.
There's
So
more
it's gonna
Klingon
be
speakers than
it's going to
Esperanto.
be the first. It's going to. We're working on that. If you would like to volunteer to be the Elven translator, to put it into Elvish, that would be a great service to the movement. So it's gonna be the first Libertarian Manifesto available online for free in every digital format possible that's open and available to an intergalactic audience. We really need to broaden the appeal of the message, and this is where it starts. I mean, hey, if they get here first, they need to know, despite our governments, we come in peace, right? And I'm really excited about this. It's going to be coming out Independence Day. It's going to be available, like I said, for free in every format possible online. Hopefully, by the time we release, we'll have audiobooks in most other languages as well, and the video series will be done. Then we're going to sell paperbacks that'll be available more or less at cost, and a lot of related merchandising stuff I'm very, very excited about. So there's part of this, though, that came from a particular epiphany that I had when I was in jail, not just about the need for this book, the niche that it's going to fill, but I got to be really humble about my experience, because 4 months, 2 months in solitary, really insignificant. And it's almost ironic, and it's kind of sad that human perspective is so warped by personal experience. But I mean, that's just the reality of human nature. To hear libertarians come to me and be like, "Dude, I can't believe you did 4 months. That's crazy. You didn't hurt anybody." When you all have heard the stories, you all have heard of way more horrific things than that. When I was in jail, there were 2 guys who were MMA fighters accused of rape, who had a video that exonerated them. No prior felonies, denied bail. They did 10 months before their trial was concluded and they were found not guilty. I mean, guys in the prime of their life, up and coming in their careers, and they never get that time back. And being government means never having to say you're sorry. And, I'm glad that there are enough people who have been to jail, and it's really exciting to see that a lot of people are now sharing these experiences in a way through the internet that was never possible before. But it's until you have that front row seat to see the wheels of justice turning backwards and grinding against the bodies, you really can't get a sense of it. And there was another guy there, a little older gentleman, who was a bit punch drunk. He had been a professional boxer, and his niece came after him with a fire poker on a bad PCP trip, and he killed her with a kitchen knife. And I helped this guy write a letter to the judge asking for leniency because his public defender convinced him to take a plea deal that didn't have a commitment for a sentence. He got 14 years, and we know this because his cousin was on our block. A week after he got transferred to the feds, he hung himself. What I experienced was really, really insignificant. And, I definitely don't want anybody to pity me. And I don't tell these stories so that people will say, "Oh, Adam, you've sacrificed so much and we want to support you." I hope that people want to support me because it means something to them, because you get something out of seeing me do what I do. And if it wasn't for people like you, doing what I do wouldn't be possible. And it's also very humbling to remember that. But in reaching out to other people and spreading this message and being as passionate I am about the moral philosophy, it took me 10 years to go from when I was in high school. I was like, well, am I going to be a Republican or a Democrat? That's really lame. Libertarian? Okay, leave me alone. Yeah, sign me up for that. And it took me 10 years to go from that to really understanding the moral philosophy. And one of the things that conclusions that I came to while I was in jail was that the greatest threat to the cause of liberty is minarchism. This insane idea that you can give all the guns and power to a small group of people and say, "Now please limit yourself." And if you understand the philosophy of liberty to be a moral philosophy, then it's an absolute. It's not, there's no compromise on that. And when you advocate for minarchism, and I don't mean as a matter of a stepping stone, but when that's what you're arguing for, you're basically saying, I only want force and violence and coercion to be used for things that I haven't figured out how to do peacefully yet. To which any big government advocate can reply, yeah, me too. And then you're back at arguing from opinion. And really that's what, that's what got me here. Being in the anti-war movement, when I started in activism was with the Iraq Veterans Against the War, and being surrounded by liberals, I was like, well, I'm a libertarian. I know I'm right about everything. I just have to prove it. And I would get in these intense debates, and it always came down to a matter of opinion. Well, I wanted to get past that, and that's what got me down the slow, long path of getting to where I am today as a philosophical libertarian. But while I was in jail, there was a 3-week period in the middle when I was really cut off. And by the way, to everybody that wrote me letters when I was in jail, thank you so much. That was really incredible. And it definitely helped with the guards, because anyone that didn't know me, when they came with the mail, would just be wandering around the block. Oh, Kokesh, 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 Kokesh. Who the hell are you? It was a great way to start a conversation. Well, I'm the guy getting fan mail in jail. What do you know? Let me tell you why. And for any of the guards that didn't know who I was, they did after that. And the other inmates kind of resented it, but they definitely respected it. So there was a 3-week period in the middle when, except for mail, and even then I was cut off for a couple of weeks because I gotten transferred and nobody really knew where I was. I could only stare at the paint peeling off the walls for so long. And I got into a kind of meditation where I just started putting things together that I already knew in a different way. And when I was in Fallujah, in combat every day, I was the guy waking up and singing songs and telling jokes and getting everybody in a good mood. And the Marines kind of condition you, right? If you can be happy anywhere, if you can be happy in combat, you got to be able to charge forward and do what you got to do and do it with a smile on your face. Kill. Yeah, exactly. If you can be happy doing something as inhumane as killing other people. Although in my case it was, save, 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 right? Most of the time. So we have a saying in the freedom movement from Thomas Jefferson that I think is really ingrained in our mentality, in the American mentality even. Life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. But that's backwards. Except for the first part. Yeah, if you don't have life, you can't have liberty, you can't pursue happiness, right? But is happiness something that you pursue? Can you go chase down happiness and beat it over the head with a club and drag it home to your cave to enjoy forever and ever? Sure. Well, yeah. Your wife doesn't count. But
that's wives.
Okay, fair enough. Okay, maybe then it counts. But it's a very simple idea that you will never control what the world throws at you. You will never control your external circumstances. You might never even master your animalistic responses to external stimuli, but your attitude and your frame of mind and your outlook are always your choice. If you don't know how to be happy, what's the point of being free? And we all engage in a kind of voluntary emotional servitude. And it's not just from government, but it's inherent again to human relations that we want to bully each other and manipulate each other emotionally. And if you understand that your outlook is always your choice, why would you ever choose to be anything less than perfectly happy? And you might be saying, well, Adam, it can't really be that easy. And you raise all these obstacles and these artificial things in your head, these constructs that keep you from this true emotional internal freedom. How many of you, when you woke up to the nature of government, again, waking up is kind of a bad term for it, 'cause it's not like waking up. And I think we do ourselves a disservice as a movement when we kind of mythologize that. Oh, like it was that one video. What's the difference between a statist and a libertarian?
6 months.
6 months, right? Well, now it's like a weekend of watching YouTube videos and reading Wikipedia articles. But it's still a process. But how many of you, when you woke up, were angry? And keep your hands up. How many of you were fearful? How many of you were afraid? How many of you were depressed? Okay, I think we've got everybody except the people in back who are drinking, which is also an acceptable response. Oh my God, government. Oh. And then you went out into the world and said, Now join me in my pain, in my fear, and my anger, and agree with me on everything. Please, your life will be just as miserable as mine. And then you wonder why we don't have more libertarians, right? And I think there's something much deeper to this philosophy that means if you're doing it that way, you're doing it wrong. You know, if you're not having fun, you're not doing it right. And if you're choosing to acknowledge these facts, if you're choosing this perspective, if you're choosing this beautiful philosophy, and it doesn't make your life better, like something is wrong with your exercise of free will. And that's what it's really about, respecting the individual human will, respecting your own will enough to say, I don't give a damn what's going on around me. I don't care what the government wants me to feel. They love it when you're afraid. If you wake up and you're afraid and people don't want to join you, and they're perfectly content with that. That fear is keeping a whole layer of people from getting engaged. But imagine if we took on this perspective 40 years ago and said, no, the philosophy of freedom is not just about relationships to other human beings, but to ourselves, to respect for our own will, to being free enough inside and emotionally to say, I am not going to be cowed by government, by fear, by external forces. I am going to respect my own free will to decide how I'm going to live and what my outlook is going to be, and I'm going to compose my mind the way that suits me.
Tell that to Dick Simcannon.
What's that?
Dick Simcannon was the owner of Aeroplastics that decided he wasn't going to charge his employees income tax anymore. And they
I will address this. Allow me if I may. When you embrace this, when you really free yourself emotionally, and you might be saying, hey, it's not that easy. Sorry, it is. It's really that easy. It's really that simple. It's a discipline. It's a discipline of living well. A meditation of living conscientiously. Meditating isn't just sitting in the lotus position and humming. Any living conscientiously is a form of meditation. Living deliberately, living well, living true to your own will. And when you do that, if you're so emotionally free that you can be happy literally with a boot heel on your neck, think about how that changes your attitude to the oppressors. To use an inclusive, dramatic term, right? To cops, to IRS agents, to politicians, to bankers, to war profiteers. I mean, you think the cops that beat up protesters are happy people?
No.
You think the politicians in D.C., you think these are well-adjusted, emotionally healthy individuals?
No.
No way. You think the bankers and the war profiteers, you think they're dumb? You think they don't know what they're doing? You think they're really satisfied with their lives? And for everything you want to say about Obama, he's not dumb. Being the front man for this criminal organization is a really competitive job position. If nothing else, he knows what he's doing. And it's not coming from a well-adjusted place. And when you're free, when you're really free, your attitude to them is completely reversed. You don't fight them. You don't resist them. You're not angry with them. If anything, you would pity them. And a truly free person will say, how can I not possibly share my joy with these people? How could I possibly allow them to continue suffering while victimizing others? Think about how that completely changes how the people who have embraced this philosophy, the way this movement relates to the world. And this is so obvious. And I know someone who's been involved in activism for decades, like Ernie, sorry to date you, sir, can attest to this. The most powerful interactions you have that change people aren't when you're yelling at them, but when you're sharing something, even if it's not at this deep level, if you're trying to wake someone up, and you're saying, hey, you're wrong, and I hate your beliefs, and why don't you figure this out? As opposed to, hey man, check this out. I figured something out. It's amazing. Can I share this with you? It's made my life better. Even if it's just on the superficial level, like I know how to talk to cops, I know how to pay less in taxes, I know how to do well without as many pharmaceuticals, I know how to relate to this whole screwed up system that we live in. And it's a message of empowerment. And I would hope that that's something that is captured in this book in a way that is a legitimate intellectual contribution to the movement. The other thing is localization. Taking governments apart from the top down. Are there any South Park fans here? All right, good, yeah. Great, yeah, libertarian crowd, a lot of South Park fans. We're going to go back a few seasons here to the Underpants Gnomes episode.
Yes.
All right. So the libertarian philosophy can kind of sound like the Underpants Gnomes to the average person, right? All right, step 1, underpants. Step 2, step 3, profit. Right? Step 1, paradigm shift. Step 2, step 3, free society. Yeah. Well, okay, maybe there's going to be a collapse. And like, really, is that the best we can come up with? Now, I know agorism is all about creating the structures locally that keep people from being dependent on government. But do we want to wait for that? Do we want to disempower government till it falls away in chunks? Like, I'm okay with that. I really think if that's not inevitable, I think we can do better. But what's the answer? Oh, we're gonna yes, absolutely build it first. But there's so much more that we can do. I mean, do you really want to wait to build it and have some kind of collapse and hope that this destructive, violent government spares you when its death throes as it clings to power?
Build it so it doesn't matter when it happens.
Still not enough. You've got people who are like, guns and ammo and MREs and water, and I'm traveling cross country in a U-Haul trailer, and I brought my MREs with me, so don't get me wrong. I'm all about it. But if it starts to collapse, who do you think the government's going to go after first? The masses huddling in the cities going, oh yeah, please protect us, government, or the ones on the outskirts saying, oh yeah, we don't need you. Oh, they're going to make an example out of you first. I'm not saying don't be prepared. I think you're far better off in that situation than huddling in the city, don't get me wrong. But how many of you have been accused of being uncompassionate because you're libertarians? Okay, most of the hands, you've all heard this argument. Even if you haven't been personally accused, doesn't it make you want to tear your hair out? Ernie's been working on it. Thanks, Ernie. Aren't you glad you stuck around? So and you go, well, how is that possible? This is the most compassionate philosophy ever. It's based on self-ownership and non-aggression principle, and what we're talking about is achieving a non-violent society. How can that not be compassionate? Well, if you don't realize that so many people are dependent on the system and your only answer is, well, we're going to be ready for a collapse, and if you're not ready, tough. That's not very compassionate. And I remember the power vacuum argument. And I used to hear the power vacuum argument be like, oh, that's crap. That's no way. Obviously, we're going to have a paradigm shift first. Then we have a revolution. We overthrow all the governments we want. Nothing's going to happen. But that really ignores the validity of this, because if we're going to fill that power vacuum with self-government, we have to create the space for that. We have to inspire that. And so, if you take governments apart from the top down, you can get people on board who are never going to be philosophically oriented. We're never going to have a paradigm shift to a philosophy before we have a paradigm shift to an easier life, more food for my family, a higher standard of living. And localization provides that immediately. You're a conservative, liberal, mainstream statist. Okay, so you believe you need to be governed. I don't have 6 months, if we're lucky, to convince you of that. Although, for a lot of people, well, as Ernie likes to say, for some people, we're just going to have to wait for them to die. I don't want to wait. And I don't think we have to. I don't think we should. And I think you can convince people to take governments apart from the top down and have more engagement in their local government and be empowered by that before you can convince them of the philosophy. And even if you can, you still need to provide a mechanism of transition. So localization goes hand in hand with localism, of building up from the bottom up, of practicing agorism, of building all these social structures that enable people to be less dependent on government. But all this leads up to, aside from a nice chapter in the book that is laying the groundwork, the fact that I am running for president in 2020 on the platform of an orderly, peaceful dissolution of the United States federal government. And every single day between now and then, they're just making my job that much easier. Ernie, did you want to say something?
Taryn just landed, and we got to go pick him up for the Freedom Summit.
All right, we'll make fun of you even more behind your back.
No, this is what's going to happen. Adam is going to be staying over, and tomorrow I have the whole 3 hours open on the show for him and Taryn, so I'm going to rip the crap out of Adam.
FreedomPhoenix.com.
Good night, guys.
Thank you,
Oh,
Ernie.
yeah, Friday night at the Freedom Summit, there's some flyers in here. Normally it's $25 because it's free drinks and appetizers. All the people here in the sound of my voice, you're allowed to go to the Freedom Summit, pre-summit party Friday night for free. Just come by and give me some donation.
Bye, Donna.
All right, I know listening to me isn't nearly as fun as drinking or whatever else people in Phoenix do. So I'll wrap this up pretty quickly, but I just want to say that we are living in a really exciting time, and I guess I'll begging permission from the Chinese, borrow a saying of theirs, which is appropriate because they're going to own this country pretty soon. May you be blessed to live in interesting times. And we see so many exponential functions of the human experience converging now. Moore's Law driving so much of it. Life expectancy, for those of you that know Aubrey de Grey, with the concept longevity escape velocity. If you're young and you're healthy today, you're going to live to be 100, and by the time you get to be 100, they will have cured all the diseases that 100-year-olds die of. And by the time you get to be 200, they will have cured all the diseases that 200-year-olds die of.
That was my mindset when I was 8.
And now, you made it. Congratulations. If you're fit and healthy today, you've probably made it past that point. We're already there. We are living in the most peaceful times in human history when you as an individual are less likely to be subject to violence at the hands of another human being than ever before. I mean, let that sink in. Go Team People. That's a huge thing to be a part of. I think we're at the high tide of government. We've certainly passed the high tide of war. You can't convince people in the age of the internet to go in masses of millions and go to the other side of the planet and kill millions of people you've never met before. The measure of the success of the anti-Iraq war movement that I was a part of is in the conversation around Syria. You couldn't convince enough of the troops to do it without shaking the foundation of the military and the credibility of the politicians pulling the strings. It wouldn't have worked. And people who wake up today look at the global war on terror and go, oh my gosh, look at this horrific monstrosity. Look at 500,000 kids in Iraq who have died as a result of sanctions between the first Gulf War and the second Gulf War. I know that's just 20 to 10 years ago. The last 10 years and all the disastrous effects that has had. And it's like, oh my gosh, but you know what? Just step back a little bit. Compare it to Vietnam. Compare it to World War II or World War I. You can't do it anymore when you can Skype with someone in Iran as easily as down the street. Like I said, I've been arrested several dozen times, not just the two big ones this last year. And it's the same thing about cops. You look back to Vietnam. You had Kent State. You had U.S. Marines marching on protesters. And yet today, all the cops have the same truth button that we do right in their pockets. And they know why you're there protesting. And the government racket depends on politicians being able to convince enforcers to point guns at people who are acting peacefully. And in a connected world, that is more and more difficult, and it will soon be impossible. Look at Bitcoin.
Yeah.
As much as they might try to suppress that, sorry, cat's out of the bag. They'd have to shut down the internet. I'll talk of the collapse. There's kind of like three things that could collapse, right? The government, and we all go, yeah, okay. But being realistic, that's not going to be pleasant for a lot of people. The next thing is the monetary system. And by the way, let's be real. We've been hearing for 40 years the dollar's about to collapse. These people have the best mathematicians money can buy. Yes, the printing is exponential, but human productivity is exponential. As long as life, quality of life keeps going up linearly, that is not going to collapse on its own. I'm not saying it's not going to, but it's not inevitable. It's inevitable that it's not going to last because people are waking up, because we all have the truth button now right here in our pockets. And this device right here, the computing power in my hand, used to take a building to house. A freaking building, and now it's in your pocket. Google just came out with the contact lens for diabetics that detects your blood sugar and transmits it by Bluetooth to your smartphone. Holy crap, this thing is going to be in your brain pretty soon here. Yep. Don't worry, I'll go first.
And then they'll turn it off.
Technology is empowering. It depends who controls it. And the faster it gets, the faster it's distributed. Think about Gutenberg. How long did it take the Bible to get distributed to lead to the Reformation? As just the simple leading tip of the change of distributed information. And now, you know, there's the car analogy, right? 100 years ago, only rich men could afford a car. Now, you know, rich man drives a Porsche, poor man drives a Honda Civic, right? Classic libertarian analogy. Well, look at the thing about communications power. The communications power that Bill Clinton had at the beginning of his presidency, by the end of his presidency, you could have in a smartphone in the hands of somebody in sub-Saharan Africa. As much communications power right there in his hand. And these are technologies that as libertarians, we didn't even think were going to come until after they were here, and then it's sort of like, duh. Bitcoin. 3D printing.
Woo. Over Unity Energy.
It goes on and on. But 3D printing, now we know it as, you know, a little device that squirts plastic into cool shapes on your desktop, right? Well, has everybody heard there's now molecular 3D printing in labs? They're putting atoms together to form molecules at the direction of a computer. And you know those devices are getting smaller and smaller. What happens when it's on your fingertip and it's controlled by a computer in your brain?
Or when it's in your food.
And you can just you can just zap things into existence out of thin air. What do you get that guy for Christmas? How do you convince someone in that world when you can work for a year or a month or then a week and support a family for the rest of your life at the quality of living that we enjoy today? This racket is unsustainable because humanity is evolving past it. When you understand that the roots of government are the same as the roots of violence because government is violence, well, I had this little fantasy that somewhere along the way, everybody would get therapy robots. And you'd be yelling at your wife, and then this little iPad would like float up behind you and go, tell me how you really feel. Yeah, right. And next thing you know, all of the psychological roots of violence are eradicated because humanity is empowered by this message. Because they're able to make those connections. And of course, exponential growth curves never get vertical. But as far as the human mind is concerned, the only way I can describe this point we're coming to is the asymptote of the human experience. And one way or another, I know that the government racket as it is today is not going to survive it, but we are living at this incredible turning point in the human experience. It's an amazing time to be alive, to be a part of this evolutionary process. And this is what gets me up, you know, every morning, you know, just eager to do what I do, is to see that we are coming to this, and that those of us who are able to make the connection now between liberty and violence and government and all these broader social dynamics have such an incredible role to play. And it would be contrary to the philosophy for me to say, you have a responsibility. You have to do this. If you have to he whom much is given, much is expected, or some moralistic crap like that. It's an opportunity. It's a chance to be a part of this, to lead this evolutionary process. And I'm just really grateful to have the support of people like you who are a part of this movement that make what I do possible. So for all of your attention tonight, and for everything that you do to the movement, and for everything that you've done to donate to Adam versus the Man, and to help make it possible for me to relaunch the show stronger and come back better than ever before, thank you so very much. And I'll be the last one to leave if anybody wants to stand around and ask questions or just talk about whatever. But I'm really looking forward to getting relaunched, and I'm just glad that everybody here is a part of it. So. This is Sierra, who's been putting up with me for the last 2 weeks on the road and doing an amazing job driving and helping out. So go drink up and come back.